the property management industry, fair housing offenses are considered especially troubling. In the United States, a dedicated fair housing attorney, Leslie Tucker, provides case explanations and best practices. These are some cases.
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to Case Files, where we analyze real fair housing cases to help property management professionals, all of you awesome people, protect their communities and avoid costly mistakes. I'm Jonathan Saar. And joining me again today is fair housing attorney Leslie Tucker. Today, we're discussing a new case out of Phoenix, Arizona. Aaron et al. Versus the X company et al. So, Leslie, what's the heart of this one?
Thanks, Jonathan. This case that we're talking about today centers on a familial status discrimination claim under the Fair Housing Act. Several families with young children lived at a property called X Phoenix, which is a large apartment complex with over 300 units. The property is marketed as amenity rich. It has a pool, a gym, a co-working space, open air decks, even a restaurant. And all of these amenities are located in one central area called the X Club. And all of the residents have access for free to the X Club, as well as members of the public as well. And for many families, this amenity space, the X Club, was the deciding factor in choosing to live there. But fast forward to October 2022, when a new management company implemented a new rule, which was children under the age of 13 are no longer allowed in the X Club at all. So that meant, no using the pool, no co-working areas, no lounge, no gym, right? So families who had leased there specifically for those amenities suddenly found themselves unable in many cases to use those amenities, while, all the residents without children continued using everything freely.
Yeah, that's a significant policy change. So how did that impact the residents?
Well, the plaintiffs claimed that it is devastating. Parents described their children crying because, they could see the pool from their balconies, but they weren't allowed to use it. They reported feeling unwelcome in the complex. Several were threatened with losing access entirely if they brought their kids into the amenities. One father even faced the threat of police removal when he refused to leave the pool area with his daughter. So eventually all of these families moved out, and they allege that they were effectively forced to leave because they couldn't use the amenities that were promised in their leases.
Interesting. Okay. So this wasn't some one-off decision by local management, right?
Right. The complaint alleges that this was part of a broader practice by the defendant, the X company, which also operated another property in Denver, and that had similar restrictions. The complaint also alleges that a prior management company came to the defendants and raised concerns about this policy, basically saying, hey, this violates fair housing law. So, the plaintiffs claim that the owners were on notice of the illegality of the policy, and yet, they continued enforcing those policies.
Got it. Okay. So what were the claims that the families, what did they state? What under the Fair Housing Act, what did they bring up?
Quite a few things. Multiple violations of the Federal Fair Housing Act, discrimination in terms and conditions of rental, publishing rules that show a preference or limitation based on familial status, retaliation and interference. And that involves a couple of the people who, allege that they were targeted after challenging this new policy. And then they made several state law claims as well. So they are asking for the company to change their policy that doesn't place restrictions on families with children, and of course, asking for damages for emotional distress and economic losses.
Got it. All right. So now for our audience, they're on the edge of their seat. How does this apply to property management professionals? So what are the big lessons from this case today?
So I think the big lessons, and by the way, this case is not closed. It is still open. So I just wanted to point that out. But amenity bans, based on children, are generally going to be found as discriminatory. So, you can't have a blanket restriction on access to common areas and facilities for children, just for children. That would be singling out families with children, and not allowing them to use the same facilities that everyone else is. Your policies have to still align with fair housing law. So even if management thinks that a particular rule is making it safer for people, or if it's easier to enforce, if it singles out families with children, again, it can certainly be seen to be unlawful. Communication is important here, and I think is a part of the heart of this case. Is the families here signed leases, right, that allegedly promised full access to the amenity spaces, and then kind of reversing that and changing those terms mid-lease seemed to them to represent a breach of that contract. And lastly, there is a retaliation allegation here in this case. Threatening eviction, police involvement, enforcement actions against residents who assert their rights can potentially compound liability if liability is found. So keep all of that in mind when you are, implementing new policies.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Excellent lessons. Great takeaways for our audience today. It sounds like a textbook example of how a policy decision can spiral into a major lawsuit. So for property managers, the message is clear, right? Like, amenities are part of the housing, and all residents, including families with children, must have equal access.
Yes, very much so. Fair housing protections for families with children are well established at this point. If there are legitimate safety concerns, they have to be addressed through neutral, non-discriminatory rules, like requiring supervision, for example, not outright bans.
Okay. Very nice. Thank you so much, Leslie. Appreciate your insights. And as you mentioned, this case is ongoing, but it already highlights the risks of ignoring fair housing basics. So to our listeners, review your policies, especially when you think of this case around children and amenities. Make sure that they comply. Equal access isn't optional, it's the law. So that's it for today. For Case Files, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Until next time, stay informed, stay compliant, keep building communities where everyone is welcome. Take care, everyone.